On behalf of Mark and the entire Adult Education Committee, I want to welcome everyone here tonight to this wonderful opportunity to learn. I would like to extend a very special thank you to Warren Harmel. Warren brought this amazing lecture to the attention of the Adult Education Committee. And I want to thank Rabbi Weinberg for grabbing it also and running with it. I hope that many of you have had the opportunity to watch Micah Goodman's lecture. If you have not, we do have it available recorded on YouTube. Please check it out after the lecture. Just a little bit of housekeeping very quickly. Rabbi's anticipating teaching for about 15-20 minutes and then opening it up for questions. We will ask you to unmute yourselves when Rabbi calls on you. You can also use the chat feature. I will be tracking questions. If you want to type in and you don't want to speak your question, I will be tracking those and forwarding them to Rabbi as well if you have questions or comments during the course of this. We are anticipating about an hour, 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. So we should be done by 8:30 at the latest, maybe a bit earlier. So plan accordingly and welcome. And I'll turn it over to Rabbi Weinberg.
Thank you, Michelle. Erev Tov, everybody, and Chodesh Tov. This evening, we welcome in the second day of Rosh Chodesh Bet, and of course, the month of Adar is most well known for Purim, so we know it's only a couple of weeks away, and I look forward to sharing a wonderful holiday with everybody this evening. As you saw me just repositioning my screen when I was trying to identify the best location earlier this afternoon, I had lots of light in my office, but I see my face is a bit shaded right now, so I apologize. I'll try to position myself as well as I can, so you can see my facial expressions. But really, it is a pleasure to be with you this evening. Thank you, Michelle, for your introduction. Thank you for stepping in for Mark. We know that he found a very suitable substitute. And I am thrilled to be able to spend a few minutes with you this evening. I also want to thank Warren Harmel, who discovered this presentation that Micah Goodman presented. And I think it's absolutely extraordinary, and I wish I could put it in front of every member of our congregation and get them to spend some time. I do want to take some time this evening to summarize the content of Micah Goodman's presentation. I'm sure some of you may not have had time to look at it yet. And I'd like us, at least to some extent, to be on the same page when we're spending a few minutes this evening. I want to begin by reminding everyone that Dr. Micah Goodman received his PhD from Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He's a senior research fellow. Did I just lose everyone?
No, sir, I just spotlighted you, Rabbi.
Okay, great, thank you. As a senior research fellow at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, and his books that have become bestsellers in Israel include a book on Maimonides, The Guide for the Perplexed, his most recent book, on the subject of, I apologize here. I was skipping over a couple of things that I had jotted down that I wanted to share with you. In Israel, Micah Goodman is known as the founder and director of Ein Prat. It's an outstanding academy for leadership, and he takes in 300 students every summer And for those of you who listened to the presentation, just imagine sitting in front of this man with his wealth of knowledge and just soaking it up. He is, I believe, he's the finest scholar on the Hartman, at the Hartman Institute, in terms of his pure intellect. And there are so many people in this world that are blessed with tremendous intellect, but don't have the capacity to communicate that. That is his brilliance. That is his gift to you and me, taking difficult, confusing, convoluted material and ferreting out of that a message that he himself has tremendous grasp of and then can share with the public at large. And that's why this outstanding scholar who deals with Jewish texts of all styles has become a bestseller in Israel. Not for only the graduates at the highest level in university settings, but for the populace of Israel, who I might remind everyone is extraordinarily well educated. Run into the typical Israeli on the street and just wonder how many advanced degrees he or she has. And so they as a society have just taken advantage of his wealth and wisdom. And of course, I remind everyone that that Micah Goodman's presentation, the lecture that we invited everybody to listen to before this evening, was given on the subject of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, Zichrono Livracha, an extraordinary human being who served as the chief rabbi of the British Empire for a number of years, has written more than 30 books, is respected the world over, has an extraordinary ability to, once again, utilize the best of our Western literature and turn to our Jewish sources and combine the two to give us pearls of wisdom. As Micah Goodman said, in every one of his books, there are unique thoughts that he shares with his readers. And that is why he developed during the course of his lifetime a tremendous following. I don't know how many people I knew that would not begin Shabbat until they printed out his Devar Torah that they could take with them to shul and read, I guess, while they weren't listening to the rabbi or their shul, and feel that they were touched by some amazing insights into where our world is today in light of the traditional Jewish sources that we turn to on a regular basis. So again, I'm going to take a few minutes and try and summarize what Micah Goodman said during the course of his lecture, which was the goal of that presentation was, what is it that compelled Rabbi Jonathan Sacks to write voluminously? What drove him? What was it that was his guiding force for decades in teaching, in communicating, in trying to guide the Jewish world and addressing the Jewish world where it was at this time in history? And Micah Goodman begins by saying that that issue, that was what compelled Rabbi Sacks to get up in the morning and be as creative as he possibly could be, was answering the question for his generation. That's you and I today. Why stay Jewish? Why hold on to our Jewish heritage when it's being challenged in so many different ways? And in order to answer that question, to understand what it is that Jonathan Sacks was trying to do, in Micah Goodman's view of the world, you have to understand the modern condition of mankind that Jonathan Sacks was addressing. And I'm going to suggest to everyone here that the challenge that Rabbi Sacks chose to accept was modern mankind's definition of where he stands in the world of philosophy as an existentialist. And when you understand what that word implies, then you can begin to appreciate where it is Rabbi Sacks is taking us. This is a very practical definition of existentialism. We are born without purpose into a world that makes no sense. But each person has the ability to create his or her own sense of meaning and peace. That's the starting point. That's where we find so much of mankind today and for the past number of decades leading up to where we find ourselves today. So Micah Goodman then moves forward in the name of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks to suggest that with this modern condition, meaning not only defined by existentialism, but where we find ourselves in history in terms of the walls of the traditional ghetto beginning to fall down, and the Jewish community being allowed to explore the world around them, Judaism lost its monopoly over its identity. Modernity smashed the past and created at the same time, or it allowed the modern age to present its greatest challenges to Judaism, at least seen through this lens, that being equality and liberty. Imagine, if you will, you've all seen examples, many of you have stood in those places. You're standing in a cathedral in Europe. I don't know if you ever asked yourself, why is it that a cathedral was built the way it was? Why are there these extraordinary buildings that reach up to the heavens, if you will? How does it make man feel when we walk into that piece of architecture? It reduces us to something extraordinarily small. And the question that we're left with is, what is so great that mankind is so small? And that was the mentality of another world. God was all-encompassing. God was this commanding force. God was everywhere. And mankind was reduced to this puny existence, encompassed by the relationship in space of man and the architecture of the traditional cathedral. Now, fast forward to the modern age. Man triumphs over God. Nietzsche says God is dead. We can do it all. It's all in our hands. And so Jonathan Sacks takes that situation and says, how do we respond to that? How does Judaism respond to that challenge? And ultimately, he suggests that deeply embedded in our texts are the best answers to the modern predicament. But you have to dig really deep because it's not on the surface. Micah Goodman uses the terms implicit and explicit. Deep down in our Jewish texts are the concepts of equality and liberty, but they're not on the surface. In fact, on the surface, it looks like we're not so equal and we're not so filled with liberty. He reminds us, though, when you uncover some of the layers, we have a concept called B'Tselem Elohim, that you and I, all mankind, are created in the image of God. Via that understanding, the sense of democracy is entered into our world. But it's not so easy to see that at times. In fact, when you look at the Jewish world from afar, he argues, does it look so equal? It looks like men, as opposed to women. Men tower far above women. In fact, it looks very much like when our relationship to our tradition is something that at some level is troubling, because we surrender ourselves to our texts and to our rabbis and to our tradition. That doesn't sound like freedom or liberty. That's a sense of surrendering the self. And so, because that, even though the beauty and wonder and the answers are embedded deeply in Judaism, says Jonathan Sacks, according to Micah Goodman, we have to dig too deep to find the answers. And therefore, because we have to dig too deep, the answer is not readily available to society at large. We demand too much of them to find answers. And so let's come up with a different approach. And so this first answer, Micah Goodman labels Rabbi Sacks' good answer. The second answer, which I'm going to turn to now, is the great answer. It's the great answer. And this best answer of Rabbi Sacks suggests that the wonders embedded, the wisdom embedded in Judaism have the capacity to heal the ills of Western culture. That Western culture that I just defined a few minutes ago, that's premised on existentialism, and so many of the extrapolations that are made from that starting point, have created so many of the challenges that define our world today. And he begins by identifying a handful of them that I want to walk through with you right now. And by the way, as Micah Goodman mentions in his talk, the last book that Rabbi Sacks published before he passed away, just a couple of years ago, was entitled Morality. And it is an indictment of Western culture. And at the same time, Rabbi Sacks provides, if you will, the antidote that Judaism provides to our modern world, to accept the ills of our world today and remind everyone of the blessing that Judaism has to offer everyone. So listen to the way he characterizes this. The first critique of our Western culture. The humanist goal is to empower man because in the past, God crushed man. And in turn, religion crushed our self-esteem. The only way to rebuild self-esteem is to reject God. Now, that's a lot to take in, okay? That's Micah Goodman's brilliance. And yet, at the same time, I think it takes all of us a little time to appreciate exactly what he is saying. The humanist mantra, reject God and embrace the self. And then your life will improve. You'll be freed. You'll be happy. You'll be self-actualized. All you have to do is reject God because God has been pushing you down. God has been limiting you. God has not given you freedom of expression. God has compelled you to follow a set of rituals that have done nothing but created a sense in you that you are less than you can become. But his challenge to this, and I think this is the wonder of both Goodman and Rabbi Sacks, is Rabbi Sacks points out this happiness that was supposed to result when man discarded God has left Western culture with such a terrible void. We are wanting in some of the most critical areas of life. And all we have to do is look at our society and ask ourselves, why are the suicide rates rising so significantly? Why is there so much depression across our world? Why is there so much anxiety? Why are so many people overdosing and using drugs? Something has gone wrong with the secular project, he suggests. We have replaced God in our attempt to gain happiness, to gain self-actualization. But what did we give up in the process, and how has it affected us? And he suggests, to sort of just go a little deeper with that, that this assault on Western culture has been an assault on meaning, an assault on community, and an assault on attention. And this is so powerful. When he talks about meaning and purpose, I mean, this has to hit home to every one of us. What do we say to our children? You're writing a great story. You are a great story. And Jonathan Sacks reminds us, he says, what we don't say is you belong to a great story. We need your voice in our Jewish story. Purpose comes from belonging to something. Yet we are taught happiness comes when things belong to us. Listen to that. Purpose, meaning, comes from belonging to something. But our world revolves, the world of advertising, of PR, of marketing. We're taught again and again, happiness comes when things belong to us. The assault on community and family, both are in crisis. And he tells this amazing story of how get a group of people together and do something, engage in some ritual for 40 weeks at a time. And after 40 weeks, they're going to start talking to one another, and they're going to start gossiping about one another. And 60 weeks later, 60 weeks, 20 more weeks, all of a sudden, they're all going to realize they're doing the same thing. And they've actually formed a community. They're gossiping about each other. That's what he wants. That's what we want. That we see one another, we care about one another. We recognize that each of us needs to be needed. It's an amazing insight into where our world is today, when there's so many lonely people around us. So many people that are looking for, how can I find my place? And then he adds that the third assault on Western culture today is that little device that so many people have sitting in front of them or in a pocket right now, that is the cause of our distraction. And he uses a couple of psychological tools that were presented to show that we are happiest when we are fully engaged with what we are doing. And that's not the way most of us operate today. We're doing something, but our mind is someplace else. We find it very difficult to stay engaged and focused on a particular subject. So having stated that secularism has backfired, he takes the natural jump. He's led us down this path that we need tradition. We need rituals to guide us back to community. We need, for a few generations now, we've run away from God. And as we've done that, we've created voids in our lives that have left Western culture, in many cases, absolutely unmoored. And so both Jonathan Sachs and Micah Goodman remind us that the beauty of a religious system, contrary to the way some people look at it, the role of God, the role of community, creates bonding, creates meaning, creates purpose. And there is nothing that is more important for us as individuals or as a community. One of the beauties of this presentation, I believe, is that when I listened to it, I couldn't stop saying to myself, if Micah Goodman were only the spokesperson for the conservative movement. He recognizes, and he says so early on in his presentation. What I tried to just distill for everyone were these polar positions, the, if you will, the existentialist and the observant Jew. The one who, the humanist who has run away from God, and the person who embraces God and God lets God into their lives. The conservative movement has always been defined as this balance, this middle movement between tradition and change, between holding on to the past and recognizing the need to imagine a different future. In terms of our world today, all of the passion in our world is on the extremes, the extreme right and the extreme left. Micah Goodman suggests, with an understanding like this, let us create passion in the middle. Let us recognize the best of Western culture and the best of our Jewish culture and create passion in the middle that enables Judaism to heal Western culture and Western culture to add its beauty and wonder to Judaism. And then we have something absolutely precious. Let me pause there and take some questions if anybody would like to interject a thought, to challenge anything that I've said or tried to say in the name of Jonathan Sachs and Micah Goodman.
Rabbi, you've unpacked an enormous amount, as he did in his lecture. To focus it a little bit, in a couple of words, what is the good answer and what is the great answer?
Very good, Warren. The good answer is that Jonathan Sachs recognized Judaism has answers, but you have to dig so deep to get them.
Right.
The great answer is, while you are finding those answers, we're actually addressing some of the inherent problems of Western culture. So it's almost like this, the great answer, the best answer is almost answering a different question than the first answer addresses. It's more broad, It's more encompassing, and it exposes the true strength and capacity for Judaism to touch lives.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I don't have anything in the queue right now. I'll remind you that if you'd like to chat to me, you can type a question, or just you can use the raise hand function, or just flag Rabbi down. We're a nice enough intimate crowd that Rabbi can probably see who's looking to ask a question.
Beth,
So
it's good to see you and welcome.
seeing you. Good seeing you again. So I listened to him and he's wonderful, and I've heard some other things he's done before too. But I felt that after the lecture, I was left with more questions than anything. I didn't feel like I got any answers. He answered the questions of what the problem is, right? Diaspora, all that stuff. But we can't go back and change. We can't leave Western culture and civilization behind. And we as conservative Jews are most likely not going to become Orthodox and just focus on one thing all day. So what do we do? I mean, I can focus on a task. ADD meds help me focus more on it. But what does that mean? We're less Jewish? Or does that mean, like, if I'm focused on a lecture of his and I'm folding laundry while I'm doing it, and I'm enjoying folding laundry because I'm a weirdo that likes that, but I'm learning that I have no answers to anything. So I feel more frustrated after some of these lectures than anything else.
Beth, I think that's a great question. And I appreciate your commentary. I sat with a person, I was at a baby naming early this week, and I sat down with somebody that I hadn't seen, not a member of our shul. I hadn't seen him in a number of years. And he was telling me, and he's your standard conservative Jew, and he's involved in his synagogue, but only to a certain extent. And he said to me, just out of the blue, he read 2 phenomenal books, and he's never felt better about himself. And he's very successful because these books helped him see his world differently. And I actually don't remember all of the qualities that these books directed him toward, but the first one was gratitude, and the second one was purpose. And I said to myself, that same concept that that Micah Goodman was referencing in the, I think, hold on, just parenthetically, one of the comments that Micah Goodman shares in the lecture is that Jonathan Sacks wrote 30 plus books. And in the course of an hour, Micah Goodman tried to synthesize those books. And some of what you're going to hear from Micah is Micah, and some is going to be Jonathan Sacks. And at times it's difficult to tell which is which. But the goal of Micah Goodman was to bring to the surface, to the best of his ability, what it was that Jonathan Sacks was doing with his life. And I would say to you, Beth, that that our conservative movement is extraordinarily broad, in whom it's welcoming into its midst. And sometimes that broad spectrum of who we are makes it really hard for us to articulate what we want to be. And, as a movement, let alone me as a rabbi, I promote Shabbat. I promote Jewish ritual participation. Now, what you're not going to hear from me as a rabbi, that you would hear from others, is ridiculing you because you don't participate. I choose the positive to move people rather than the negative. Jonathan Sachs is saying to us, if you are a bit confused, if you're looking for those pillars that define how to get meaning out of life, you don't have to look very far. If we could get our community to appreciate that we need you for minyan, how many lonely people would stop being lonely? There is so much wisdom in the traditional expressions of our Judaism. That doesn't mean we have to go back in time. So much of this is repackaging what we had so that it looks more appealing to the modern generation. How many times have we all heard language like that? Isn't that taking something that's implicit and making it explicit? To use Micah Goodman's words, every generation, what's the practice of midrash? Reinterpretation of old ideas so that they speak to where we are today. And I think, every time I hear somebody say something like this person said to me, it's like a reminder to me that we have done such a poor job of packaging and selling and marketing. Are there challenges to the assumptions that I just presented? Absolutely. But come on, let's be honest. This set of arguments, first of all, Jonathan Sachs spent a lifetime presenting them, and he was admired and respected. He was knighted by non-Jewish people wherever he went. This is wisdom. This isn't just truth. And there is so much truth in what he has to say. But we have too many people that are scared to walk down that road. That have a lifetime of, what can I say, challenges to overcome before they allow themselves to explore. Some of the different disciplines that work with people say we have to do a better job of providing the scaffolding that's needed to support people when we find these points of entry, to give them the comfort to walk in the doors, to feel the warmth and the beauty and the wonder of what we are, quote unquote, selling. And I believe that what Jonathan Sachs has given to us over the course of his lifetime, what Micah Goodman tried to distill in an hour's presentation, is brilliance. I mean, who in their right mind would not say that the United States of America is suffering extensively from loneliness, from anxiety, from what all the things that we read about every single day? And add to that, right now, this is one, I mean, I haven't looked at this, the sociological studies. I should be probably more in tune with every one of the Pew studies that are done. But there aren't many more times in the lifeline, the lifetime of the United States of America, when fewer people have been engaged in their religion. It has an impact. That extraordinary book that was written, I don't know how many sermons it wound up, some element of it in my sermons, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. This was, I believe it started out as his dissertation thesis. What's happened to America? What's happened to Western culture? And again, there are challenges to it. And of course, there are challenges to everything, but who would argue that in the 1960s, 1950s, how many leagues were there at bowling alleys that brought people together, that got us out of our homes with our walls, our fences around every single household that is the definition of Dallas, Texas? And we find one another. We share with each other. And so much of religion is helping us find one another, share life's beautiful moments and life's challenging moments. And our Jewish tradition has created this model. We need a minyan. We need each other. Of course, you can pray on your own. But if you really want to engage, and if you want to conduct the kind of prayers that we should be doing, we're expected to be doing, we need each other. And that creates something amazing, something so powerful. And I think the part that you were getting at, Beth, was, to be what we want to be takes discipline. And it requires us to say that certain things are more important in our lives than others. And we've chosen a set of decisions as a society, and look where they've led us. And then if you want to really take be honest with it for a few minutes, look at an observant community and ask, where is their sense of community? What is it giving to those people? Why do observant Jewish communities build their homes around a synagogue so they can walk to each other's homes and spend Shabbat with each other? Now, we could drive to each other's homes and do the same thing, but do we? That's part of the beauty of the halachic structure that says to us, there are reasons that these laws are premised upon. They superimpose a certain mindset that not everybody, you don't have to follow it, but if you want some of the advantages, then you give up some things. And right now, Jonathan Sachs and Micah Goodman today is saying, my goodness, we have lost so much. We have given away our soul. And here's how you can regain it. I think it's a pretty powerful message. Anybody else have a thought or a comment? Let me ask you this. As you were listening to the presentation by Micah Goodman, or if you didn't, and I just tried to summarize it, as best I could. Did anybody sort of flash back to what Yehuda Kurtzer was talking about? Bonnie? Bonnie, you're on mute.
Okay, it's so funny that you said that because I know you can't read minds across Zoom, but that's exactly
You think
what
I can't do that?
Well, I can't, okay. But while Micah Goodman was talking even, I was thinking about our scholar, and he was saying that when he said that the Chabad does such a great job of outreach, and it seems like the conservative movement is sort of lacking in that. I mean, even when, you know, Noah just lives in Arlington, Virginia, and for the holidays, he went, because it was close, he went to a Chabad service. My goodness, they enveloped him, they gave him an aliyah. They couldn't do enough.
Right.
So I was actually, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
So what during the course of Micah Goodman's presentation made you think about that moment in Yehuda Kurtzer's talk?
Well, he said, as I said in the very beginning, I watched it, well, we had that ice, so I don't remember everything so specifically, but he said that we have to stand up and we have to sort of make a noise, I think, sort of, and stand up, and we're here.
So you're saying the two of them were saying similar things,
Yes.
Obviously packaged differently.
Right. One was talking about the Orthodox, and Micah Goodman was talking about the conservative.
Okay. And just so you all know, I don't know that Micah Goodman would identify himself as a Masorti or conservative Jew. My guess is that he probably would be identified in Israel. Actually, I don't know. I honestly don't know where he would be where he identifies. But he is certainly passionate about his Judaism and is an amazing explicator. His ability to succinctly express a thought is something that I think is very, very special. All right, anybody else have a comment or a question?
So, Rabbi, do you think that we are, as conservative Jews, if you will, and I hate to use the word victim, but are we struggling because of our lack of outward passion? Would you perhaps compare us to, as Micah Goodman described in this lecture, to being sort of the hidden treasure of our Judaism, as opposed to being very outward, you know, that we are maybe more inward facing in terms of the discovery of the jewels of what our Judaism gives us? Am I making sense with that question?
You're very much making sense with that question. And I think that's probably a nice place to conclude. I'm sure that I am not the only one on this screen this evening that has said to myself, where is the silent majority? Especially in our bifurcated world today. And I'm talking about our political world. Where is the center? And I don't want to go there right now, but the parallelism is so, I think it's quite profound. The conservative movement is that centrist movement between orthodoxy and reform. And of course, we're speaking in very broad strokes, and there are all kinds of modifications of all of our movements, but we are the centrist movement. And typically the centrist movement is the most broad, and therefore essentially very difficult to characterize in a simple statement. And not only is it difficult to characterize clearly and succinctly, but it is difficult to engender passion in the middle, especially when people see themselves as neither here nor there, so I'll go in the middle. As opposed to, I see the truth over here and the truth over there, and I want to combine the two and stake out my territory in the middle, wave the flag, wave the banner, and say, follow me. Because there is so much wisdom on both sides. But don't close your eyes because you're so far to the right. Don't close your eyes to anything that somebody on the left might have to offer in the discussion. That's the wonder of being in the middle. That's the wonder of the conservative movement, of being able to acknowledge the gifts of the reform movement. And when I say the gifts of the reform movement, I don't mean just the gifts of today's reform movement, but the gift of the progressive movement throughout history, as opposed to the gifts of the more traditional element of Judaism throughout history. It's a powerful statement. We should be so proud of doing that. But for the most part, and maybe it's not saying for them, that's not fair to say for the most part, but there are too many of us in the middle that are just here because we're neither here nor there, rather than saying we want to be here. We're proud of being here. We know why we're here. We're not just not that and not that. We are occupying the center because of what it represents, because it's so honest, and it recognizes the strengths of both sides. Historically, meaning over the last 100 years or so, it's been a hard argument to articulate. We have, wonderful examples where we've done a better than average job, but as a movement, it's been a tough time for us the last 30, 40 years of the conservative movement. But something, like most things in life, there is an ebb and flow to everything. And as we have become, maybe if you want to, I didn't share this because I wanted to look at it this way, but if I were to say we got too big and too wide and too unfocused, we've lost a lot of congregations, a lot of conservative Jews. Maybe we're stronger today. Maybe we're a lot stronger today. There's been a lot of self-review during the last period of our conservative movement. But there's a lot more work that has to be done. We have a lot of packaging yet to accomplish. And being those who are in the middle, the middle, especially today, is in fact so wide. We can repackage ourselves any way we want, whether we're moving a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left or a whole lot to the right and a lot to the left, and still be in the quote unquote middle. And so, every conservative rabbi, every conservative congregation marks their path, identifies their journey. And I want to believe that it is it's an exciting place to be. I believe it's extraordinarily honest in the way we see the world around us. And when a Jonathan Sachs and a Micah Goodman, pass before us, it's amazing, I think, to hear their voice and utilize that thought and apply it to where we sit in the conservative movement. Because remember, neither of them were talking about the conservative movement. It wasn't on their mind. It never came off their tongue. It was not a part of their vocabulary. But what they both were dealing with, to a pretty significant extent, is where we are today. And so if we can impassion our center, if we can articulate what we stand for and why we're proud of it, we have an amazing message for the world. And that's, listen, you know me. That's why I'm always pounding the pavement and saying, we need you at Minion. We need a daily Minion. Not only so that you can feel a part here and not be lonely, but so the next person that needs that Minion knows they can find it in our community. And we can be there for each other when we really need each other. That takes discipline. That takes an acknowledgement that there is beauty in our rituals. It takes courage to stand up today when everybody is continuing to discard religion and say, guys, you're missing the point. There is so much to offer our world if you want to scratch the surface a bit. And we welcome you to do that.
Rabbi, I felt we had a very similar message to what you're saying from three of our recent scholars. I think that was very much what I heard Yehuda Kurtz say, is that Judaism is dynamic and it's changing, and we won't really recognize a lot of it perhaps in 50 years' time. I remember Ed Feinstein making a similar point of the need to look out, look forward, and make adjustments. And I think somebody who's been doing that was one of our other scholars, which was Rabbi Sharon Brous. And I think in their own different ways, they're articulating very much what you've just been saying.
Thank you, Warren. The interesting thing about what you just pointed out is that let's take Micah out of the picture for right now, because I don't want to characterize him incorrectly. But there's no question that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was an Orthodox rabbi.
Very much so.
I mean, he was proud of his orthodoxy. He represented it in the best way, and the right wing of the Orthodox movement did not see eye to eye with him.
Yes.
He was too liberal for them. But the three people that you pointed out were on the progressive side. So look at what we've done. You just said, didn't Jonathan Sachs and Sharon Brous say the same thing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I agree with you, but just to make us think about that and to challenge what we're thinking and how we're thinking about it, I think is so important. And listen, there are many attempts. There have been many attempts. There will continue to be many attempts to recharacterize, repackage, the conservative movement in our individual congregations. But when it's all stripped down, it really does revert back to a great extent, not exclusively, but to a great extent, what were the code words, the motto, if you will, of the conservative movement 75 years ago, let alone 50 years ago. And that was tradition and change. That balance is dynamic. It's always changing. And you pointed out a couple, if not three people who tended more to the change side.
Yes.
Rabbi Sachs was much more compelling towards holding on to the tradition because of the wonder in that tradition and repackaging it as it addresses the needs of our world today. But they both are part of that dynamic. And I think that that's the challenge that you and I have, to take these personalities, their thoughts, and make them our own, if you will, when they speak to us, when they energize us, when they impassion us. Because especially when we're talking about a man like Jonathan Sachs, I mean, I'm honored to be able to talk about him, to take some of Micah Goodman's words and share them with a group of people like you, so that we all might be able to more deeply appreciate what his gift was to our world. In any case, I encourage all of you, to read anything you can get your hands on that Rabbi Sachs has written. His command of Western literature, as well as Jewish literature, is essentially unmatched. And he was such a gift, and it was such a loss. It was a kind of loss when Adine Steinsaltz passed away. These were monumental figures who not only had reached such heights in their area of discipline, but they shared it. They found a way to share their brilliance with the world around them.
One thing that people may not be aware of was the very close relationship between Rabbi Sachs and Prince Charles.
Yes.
When Rabbi Sachs retired from being chief rabbi, the principal speech at his retirement was made by Prince Charles. And they were very close. And although he was Jewish and Prince Charles is Anglican or whatever, I think he looked on Rabbi Sachs as one of his key spiritual guides.
He was a remarkable human being who, as I said earlier, and as Warren just mentioned, was able to touch the soul of so many non-Jewish people in so many different environments. And this was a passionate man for his Orthodox Judaism. Why? Why was he able to do that? Because what I tried to share with you earlier on this evening, because he recognized that the failures of Western culture could be directly addressed by a simple commitment to community. And every religion creates community. And we have a tendency to run away from that, because community might expect something from us. Yeah, it does, or it should. And look at the advantages that we take home with us. The Gemara says, "Lefum tsa'ara agra." according to what we give is what we take home with us. If we're willing to, if we're willing to give of ourselves, the reward that comes back to us is exponential. And that, I believe, is one of the most beautiful blessings of community. It takes work. It takes dedication. It even takes that word discipline. But look what you have when you're willing to walk that road. You have vibrancy, you have dependency, you have a shared purpose in life. You do not have loneliness. You do not have alienation. You have self-actualization. That's what the rest of the world is fighting. That's what the rest of the world is fighting. And I believe that has to be our gift to our world. And we have to start by trying to package that in a way that our own congregants can see and feel and experience these inherent gifts that are ours, that are more explicit than people would like to believe. But we have to get them in the door. We have to get them into their seats. We have to meet them in a Starbucks, whatever it takes. We have to communicate. All right, it's starting to get late. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the comments, the questions. Thank you for the opportunity to share some teaching from Micah Goodman and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory. Let me just conclude, and then I'm sure Michelle will say a brief word or two, but let me say that today, Micah Goodman can be, anyone can learn with Micah Goodman today because of this technology that we're utilizing right now. And it's hard to believe that the pandemic directed us here, but without any question, this is one of those amazing silver linings associated with the last 2 years. Micah Goodman is a brilliant, brilliant individual. And as are all of the members of the Hartman faculty in Jerusalem. Yehuda Kurtzer here is in the United States of America. Take advantage of these people. There is so much to be garnered from them. They have so much to teach us, so much wisdom to share. And what they're really doing is exposing, revealing, giving us the opportunity to uncover the gems of our tradition that have been buried to some extent for a long period of time. And people have chosen not to allow themselves to see these pearls of wisdom. The Jonathan Sachs have come along and opened those packages for us and given us the opportunity to sort of stand on their shoulders and take advantage of their work. So thank you. Erev Tov and Chodesh Tov as we begin Adar Bet, the second month of Adar. Michelle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Rabbi Dan. Thank you so, so much for running tech. Very much appreciated. Warren Harmel, again, thank you very much for bringing this amazing lecture and concept to the attention of the Adult Ed Committee. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I know it's been a very, very busy and fruitful Adult Ed week. So thank you for taking time this evening to be with us. Erev Tov, Chodesh Tov.